We're going to continue our discussion on motorcycle controls this week by looking at one of the least used controls on a motorcycle, the rear brake. You know, before we get into that, I'm sure some of you will ask about this mug that I've got sitting over here. A friend of mine made this for me, an old college friend of mine, and she sent this to me, and man, it looks really cool. Let me get it out of these studio lights and get some better shots for you. But I wanted to offer these to MCrider viewers. We're only going to be offering it for the month of April, so if you want one of these, now is the time to get it. And you can go to mcrider.com/mug, and I've got an order form for these. The money will come to me, and then I will pay Shelly, who is going to make these for us, and they'll be shipped to you handmade from Oklahoma. So I hope you guys will take advantage of this. Again, these will only be available during the month of April. And I hope you guys will get one. I'm sure you'll really like it. It's made out of this metal. It's got the MCrider logo, see you on the road. And then over on the back side, it's got this really cool flag and eagle design. And I know it's going to stay in here in my shop. That's what I'm going to drink water from. I know you would appreciate one as well, too. So mcrider.com/mug. Again, this is only available for the month of April, and then it will never be offered again. So if you want one, now's the time to get it. When I was a kid learning to ride, there was the idea that the front brake was dangerous on a motorcycle. In fact, they told you to stay away from it. Then we learned more about weight transition and how much stopping power comes from the front brake, and in some cases, the inverse of what we were taught years ago is now being taught. In fact, many riders now stay away from the rear brake because they're afraid of locking it up and they only use the front brake. I think part of this comes from our desire to just have a simple answer to a complex problem, and the public just wants to tell me, you know, which brake should I use all of the time. Just tell me which one to use. But I think a lot of the issues can be resolved if we better understand the role of each brake and how both can be used to our advantage. I like how Ken Condon describes the role of each brake. Ken says a front brake is the power brake because the weight transfers to the front of the motorcycle when we stop, and that weight transfer gives more traction to the front tire. Front brake also takes on the role of getting you and the motorcycle stopped as soon as possible. The front brake is almost always more robust on a motorcycle. Often there are two rotors and calipers on the front of a motorcycle and only one on the rear. But even when there's just a single brake on the front of the motorcycle, it is almost always more robust than the brake that's found on the rear of the motorcycle. The front brake is more robust because it's the power brake and it takes the role of getting the motorcycle stopped in a hurry. The rear brake is the control brake. It provides additional stopping power on the road, but it also serves as a tool for when the rider wants to refine their speed and direction. So when is the best time to use the rear brake and under what circumstances? Well, the rear brake is used exclusively during slow speed maneuvers. I don't quite understand the physics behind it, but riding a motorcycle at slow speeds, say 5 miles per hour or less, the motorcycle will be much more balanced if the rider is using clutch in the friction zone, minimal steady throttle, and then putting slight pressure or dragging the rear brake. There's something about that tension between the rear brake and the motorcycle pushing forward with the clutch in the friction zone that really adds a great degree of stability to the rider at slow speeds. Also, when coming to a complete stop at slow speed, you want to use the rear brake to complete the stop. If the rider uses the front brake in a situation where they're going really slow, weight transfers to the front, and if the handlebars are slightly out of alignment, the bike is going to want to fall over in that direction. So at slow speeds, the rear brake is your friend. For normal stops out on the road, you always want to initiate the stop using both brakes, the front and the rear. During regular city riding, you could stop with either brake, but using both brakes is more efficient and it provides an added benefit to the rider. The biggest benefit that it provides is that in an emergency, we don't rise to the occasion. Most of us are lucky if we do what we normally do when we're really under pressure to get the motorcycle to a stop. And if your normal habit is stopping exclusively with the front or the rear brake exclusively, that's what you're most likely to do in an emergency. So approaching a stoplight on the city streets, we should make a habit of applying the front and rear brake for the stop. That develops that muscle memory, and it's more likely that that's what we will continue to do in an emergency where every bit of stopping power is needed. But remember, our rear brake is the control brake. So if you want to smooth out your stops and make them in more control, you might want to consider finishing the stop out on city streets using the rear brake. So in practice, it looks more like this. The rider's approaching a red light. They apply the front brake and rear brake smoothly while downshifting to the appropriate gear. During the last few feet of the stop, or say the last 5 miles per hour of the stop, if you smoothly release the front brake and you finish the stop with the rear brake, you'll be amazed at how much smoother your stops will become, because the motorcycle will have less of that weight transfer at the very end of the stop, and the bike will be much more in balance when you finish the stop. I have a whole video on this technique. If you want to learn more, head over to mcrider.com/stop and control. If you want more information on this stopping technique and to see real-world examples of this technique in practice. But can you use the rear brake while trail braking? Well, first, let's define what trail braking is. Trail braking is carrying some brake force past the lean-in or the entry of the turn to allow the rider to control their entry speed. But it also has an added benefit for us out on the street, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But can a rider control their entry speed using the rear brake and trail braking with the rear brake into the corner? Well, the simple answer to that is yes. But as I said, on the street, there's another benefit to trail braking. So if the rider's moving through the corner and they have slight pressure on the front brake, they're transferring weight to that front tire. If that rider then needs to stop the motorcycle, let's say an animal runs out into the corner or something is in the corner, if they're already on the front brake using trail braking into that corner, they're in a much better position to get the motorcycle stopped than a rider who's applying rear brake to trail brake into the corner. Because that weight has already transferred to the front, they can simply stand the motorcycle up and stop, or apply a little more trail braking or front brake in that corner to tighten the corner up even more. So you can trail brake with either brake, but in my opinion, there are some added benefits to using the front brake to trail brake, especially when it comes to cornering out on the street. But keep in mind that I consider trail braking an advanced rider technique. New riders, in my opinion, are better served by following the MSF guidelines and doing all of their slowing prior to the corner, using that front and rear brake. I've got a discussion on this. If you'd like to see that, go to mcrider.com/trailbrake-new rider for a video on that topic. Anytime I have a discussion on which brake to use, I always get the question about linked brakes. So linked brakes are when the front or rear brake is automatically applied by the motorcycle when the rider uses just the front or rear brake exclusively during the stop. So if a rider applies just the rear brake, some motorcycles with linked brakes will apply to a lesser degree some of the front brake automatically. Depending on how the manufacturer set up their linked braking system on your motorcycle, you'll have to do some research to find out how yours actually operates, or if it's got linked brakes at all. Notice I did say that it's to a lesser degree that the front brake is applied automatically, or the rear brake, whichever the case may be. Because the brake is applied to a lesser degree, linked brakes do not change our techniques at all. So it will have some effect on how all this works, but it doesn't change our technique for using the front and rear brake. So let's say you're riding at slow speed, you've got the clutch in the friction zone, you're using a little bit of rear brake to help balance the motorcycle. If you've got linked brakes, it's also applying automatically a little bit of the front brake, but that doesn't affect your technique at all. You still want to use the proper brake, and depending on what braking system is on your motorcycle has no real effect on your technique for using the front or the rear brake. If you're getting the bike back out after your winter hiatus, I want to encourage you to spend some time working on the fundamentals. You can become a member and get access to the field guide, and I've got several exercises that you can practice on your own on any open parking lot. Work in particular on slow speed skills and emergency braking, and knock off that wet or rust before the riding season gets into full gear. You'll also get access to the forums and get feedback from other professional riding instructors and other riders in your area. You know, who knows, you may even find a member near you and get together and train and go for a ride. A lot of riders are meeting up through the forums and getting together to practice. So till next week, guys, it's Kevin with MCrider, and I'll see you on the road.